Let's paint Greylag Goose. Hi, I'm Run. Welcome to Run My Art's watercolor tutorial series. So the Greylag Goose is a common breed found in Europe, and this footage was taken somewhere in March during winter in Europe. So I'll be demonstrating the tutorial on Canson cold press watercolor paper, which is of 300 grams per square meter, and is going to be half of A4, which is A5. And just sharing over here a simple sketch process that I made. It's nothing complicated, in case you're eager to know how I drew these geese. So I'm just adding a tree trunk in the background with some mushrooms that I noticed growing on the tree barks. And based on the reference photo or the video that you would have seen earlier, is actually a lakeside view, but I'm going to keep the background simple. So the two major brushes that I'm going to use are these two flat brushes from Da Vinci, and usually I hardly use flat brushes, so I thought today's video could be helpful for those who would like to use flat brushes. However, occasionally I might use my round brushes to help me with some part of the painting. So to kickstart with the painting, I am going to pre-wet the geese images using a bigger flat brush, followed by the smaller brush where the first color that I'm using here is Sapphire. You can also use burnt umber. However, the color might have slight variation, but not to worry as long as it's within darker brown shade. And since a flat brush is very angular, your painting process will be angular as well. And over here, after cleaning my flat brush and damping it on a paper towel, I'm just using the damp brush to make some light washes from the main color that I applied earlier. Since the geese body is not fully dark in color, they still have some lighter shades, so this would be a good technique to spread the color. Next, I'm painting the second goose using the same method by pre-wetting the goose image and then applying the first Sapphire using the smaller flat brush. Since the flat brush is very angular, as I mentioned earlier, you need to make very small brush strokes in order to achieve the shape of the image that you're painting. And over here I am using the damp brush, just making some light washes similar to the first goose. Next, I'm making some mixes of orange or tangerine color. You can do this by mixing lemon yellow with cadmium red and painting that for the smaller details, which is the beak and the feet of the geese. Alright, next I am pre-wetting the bottom half of the sketch to paint some ground details or grass details. And I am using a brighter green shade for the grass painting. I achieved this by mixing permanent green with some Indian yellow. You can use your sap green if you have a ready-made one. And I'm using a bigger flat brush since this is a more spacious area to paint. And to add some color variation to the grass details, I've mixed a little bit of sapphire to the permanent green mix and achieve a darker green shade. Now a little bit of burnt sienna to indicate some ground areas, followed by a little bit of permanent green here and there. And now for some extra effect, I'm using my water spray and spraying that onto the wet paint. I can notice a close-up view of how those water droplets created some effect on the wet painting, and we shall leave this to dry. So now I am pre-wetting the tree trunk area with clean water, once again using the bigger flat brush. And with the same big flat brush, I'm using the same color mixture, which is sapphire as the main dominant color for the tree trunk, followed by a little bit of burnt sienna here and there. So once applied the wet paint, I'm just mixing these two colors up. Next, for the upper half of the background, I am going to paint them in a very cool grey shade, and I achieve this by mixing my sapphire blue, which is of the darker tone, with some burnt sienna. And before I paint, I am once again pre-wetting them with the clean water and then applying that cool blue tone using a smaller brush. You can use the same bigger brush if you want to. Using the damp brush, I'm just giving it some light washes to achieve a smooth look. Now I am repeating the same process onto the left hand side of the background. So the painting is completely dry, and over here I'm just showing you the effects that I achieved with the spray bottle. Next, I'm going to paint the feathers of these geese. So I'm using the same sapphire mix with a hint of sapphire blue. You can also add a little bit of black into your sapphire mix, but you don't want too much of it because the geese feathers are not completely black but of a darker brown shade. And since it's a small area of painting, once again I'm using the smaller flat brush and just making some lines which mimics the shape of the geese feathers. I can easily achieve this since the flat brush has got a very narrow tip and very much angular or sharp. So just carefully make the impression of those feathers by just placing the bristle. I'm not even making any brush strokes here. I'm just applying the paint with a dab on the image of the geese. And next, I am going to soften the feathers impression that I made by making soft washes using my clean damp round brush. I really needed my round brush to achieve this effect since the flat brush would be a bit troublesome. So just give them light washes with a damp brush and not a very soaked wet brush, and you'll achieve this softened look of the geese feathers. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the second goose but there can be some variation in my brush angle, since this particular goose is facing sideways. Now, using the same color mix, I've dabbed some color or paint onto the eye area of the goose, and I am softening it with a damp brush as well. Next, I am going to fine-tune the tree painting by making some mixes of dark brown shade. Basically, I've made changes in the composition of both the burnt sienna and sapphire mix and arrived at this color. I would say I've increased the burnt sienna, which is why it looks dark brown instead of the very dull shade of the sapphire. And I'm also going to include some mixes of dull green, and you can achieve this by adding some sapphire and yellow to your dark green mix, just dabbing it here and there to indicate impression of some moss on the tree bark. Now extending the tree trunk colors onto the ground as well to indicate the roots or soil on some part of the ground. Now to paint the mushroom noticed on the tree trunk, I've added a little bit of yellow ochre onto the sapphire mix that I had, and quickly painting that using my round brush, since it's a very small area of painting. Repainting the feet of the geese as well as their beaks using the same tangerine color that I made earlier. Now I am using a clean damp brush to give it some light washes so that it doesn't look very sharp and looks more blurry, to indicate some motion, as if the geese are still walking or hidden by the grasses. Now to add more details into the grass area, I have used the same permanent green mix with sapphire and just randomly making some brush strokes using the flat brush here and there. And in order to paint the grass shapes, I am using my script brush with the same paint mix, which is the dull green. And since the bristle of a script brush is very long and narrow, you can achieve the grass effect easily. And over here I am using a damp brush to soften all those hard lines as a result of dry paint. Next, I am going to paint more details onto the body of the geese using the same script brush, and I have added a little bit of black into my sapphire mix in order to arrive at this darker color. Next, I am going to paint some shadow or dark areas underneath those mushrooms. I'm using a sapphire mix to just lightly make impressions of shadow. And after applying the paint, I am just softening it with a damp brush. Alright, time to paint some highlights by using white gouache, starting off with a dot on each of the geese eye or cornea, and also extending the gouache mix using my script brush onto the mushrooms. I think the moment I applied the gouache onto the mushroom, you can visualize them even better. And applying the same white gouache mix with the same script brush onto the feathers of the geese. Not too much, but just here and there. Trying to create some textures onto the tree bark, and you can achieve this by dry brushing, meaning you don't have too much paint onto your bristle of your brush and just drag them on your painting or paper. Now creating some splatter using my fan brush using the same white gouache mix. You can do this by using toothbrush would do to achieve these tiny spots or splatters. You can use other paint colors as well, as in permanent green or sapphire, to create the splatter in order to create some contrast. Lastly, I am just repainting some of those grass effects that I created earlier, as I noticed they have faded a bit. So if you'd like to paint some tiny flowers or weed onto the ground area, go ahead, use your imagination. And with this, I'm done with this entire painting tutorial. So if you liked this tutorial and find it helpful, then do share with your family and friends. They might like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you again in another exciting tutorial. Bye.